If you're thinking about whether you need a dynamic or a condenser microphone, then this is the right video for you. First, let me tell you that there's no better microphone type overall because every microphone type is suitable for different situations. So let's take a look at the most important differences. Dynamic microphones, specifically moving coil microphones, are built like a speaker, but work the exact opposite way. The diaphragm is permanently connected to a magnetic coil that is immersed in a static permanent magnetic field. When sound waves hit the diaphragm, it begins to move. This causes the attached coil to move as well, producing a current that is directly proportional to the sound waves. Condenser microphones work differently. These microphones consist of a very thin electrical conductive diaphragm, which is positioned directly in front of another metal plate. The other metal plate is fixed, while the diaphragm is movable. The diaphragm and metal plate together form a plate capacitor. When sound hits the diaphragm, it causes it to vibrate, which changes the distance between the diaphragm and the metal plate. This also changes the capacitance, since it's directly related to the distance between the diaphragm and the metal plate, and thus generating an electrical current. And these electrical currents are what we call electrical sound waves. The most important difference for us audio engineers is the sensitivity, and you will see why in a minute. Condenser microphones are much more sensitive than dynamic microphones, which means that they pick up much more details from the sound. But this also means that condenser microphones pick up much more of the room and of the environment when recording, even when using the same polar pattern as dynamic microphones, because they are so sensitive. Let me show you an example. I am using the same condenser microphone, the Neumann U87, but I'm in my living room right now, which doesn't have any acoustic treatment at all. There's no absorber, so there's a lot of reflections and a lot of echo in the sound, as you can hear. I don't think I could use a recording like this for a professional production, to be honest. My voice sounds muddy and unclear, and it just has a lot of echo. If I get close to the microphone like this, it improves a bit as the voice to reflections ratio is better, but the problem then is that the bass frequencies are emphasized too much because of the proximity effect and my voice sounds unnatural. But if I switch to a dynamic microphone like this, things change. My voice sounds way clearer now, or more defined, and this is because this microphone doesn't pick up so much echo. And this is like this because, as I already said, dynamic microphones are less sensitive, so they pick up less of the reflections and of the environment and pick up much more of the direct sound. This also means that they are less prone to feedback in live situations. I did this to show you that if you're recording vocals in an untreated room, you should definitely use a dynamic microphone. It will always sound better, no matter how expensive the condenser microphone is and how cheap the dynamic microphone is. Higher sensitivity also means that condenser microphones require less preamp gain compared to dynamic microphones when recording. This Neumann U87, for example, requires me to turn the preamp gain to about a half of the maximum to get a decent level when recording my voice. The Shure SM7B, on the other hand, is known for having a very low sensitivity. This is why I also use this fathead amplifier when recording with this microphone, because this gives you 27 dBs of extra gain. I could use this only with the preamp of my console, but I would need to tune the preamp almost to its maximum and it would produce a lot of noise, and I don't want that. Condenser microphones are typically used for studio recording because they provide a level of detail that a dynamic microphone cannot provide by design. They have a very wide frequency response, which means that they can pick up the very low and the very high frequencies very well. This results in a more detailed and a more precise sound overall. The high frequencies, especially, they produce this coveted high-end or high-fidelity sound that most listeners expect from records nowadays. You can see all this on the audio spectrum of this large diaphragm condenser microphone as I'm talking. Dynamic microphones in general pick up a smaller frequency range, which means that they don't go that high and that low. This one in particular, the Shure SM58, sounds quite good on the voice, but as you can see and as you can hear, it doesn't go that low like a condenser microphone. If I would like to record with a dynamic microphone but still get a wide frequency response, I would switch to this Shure SM7B, which is a bit more expensive, but it gives you a pretty wide frequency response for a dynamic microphone. To be honest, it sounds almost like a condenser microphone. You can hear directly that it picks up the low frequencies much better than the Shure SM58, and it sounds very detailed. This Telefunken M80 microphone is also a great option as a dynamic microphone. It provides a lot of details and lays in the middle of the price of both Shure microphones. This also has a very broad frequency response for a dynamic microphone and provides a lot of details, especially in the high frequencies, as you can hear. Still, the frequency response will always be better with a condenser microphone like this, but you can get very close with good microphones like this or the Shure SM7B. Dynamic mics, concretely moving coil microphones, are more resistant to all kinds of mechanical damage than condenser microphones. The Shure SM58 is said to be the most durable microphone in the world. There's countless videos on YouTube of people showing how resistant this microphone is. There's people dropping it from high heights, dropping it into water and even using it as a hammer. And afterwards the microphone is still sounding like the first day. This would be impossible with a condenser microphones. Condenser microphones can break quickly if you don't handle them with care. That's why you usually use condenser microphones only in the studio and not in live situations. If you drop a condenser microphone to the floor, it may break and it may sound different afterwards. Condenser microphones cannot handle sound sources as loud as dynamic microphones. That's why, for example, we use dynamic microphones for close miking the drums in the studio. We use condenser microphones for the drums as well, but only as overheads or as room microphones because these microphones are placed far away from the drums. You generally want to choose a dynamic microphone whenever you're close miking a very loud sound source, for example, when recording drums, when recording electric guitar amps, or when recording bass amps. You can also use condenser microphones in some situations, but you need to place them a bit more far away and be very careful with the preamp gain. The polar pattern of a microphone describes how the microphone reacts to sound waves coming from all directions around the diaphragm. The polar pattern is not overall different because every microphone model has a different polar pattern. But most dynamic mics have a cardioid, a supercardioid or a hypercardioid polar pattern because they are intended usually for live use, and in that situation you want to isolate the sound source. But there's also dynamic microphones with omnidirectional polar patterns as well. Condenser microphones are more varied, and the more expensive models usually offer the possibility of switching the polar pattern between figure of 8, cardioid or omnidirectional. This is the case on this Neumann U87. This has a little switch here and you can switch between these three polar patterns. This is very practical because it allows the audio engineer to experiment with the sound of the different polar patterns, because it is indeed a bit different because the proximity effect is different on every polar pattern. But cheaper condenser microphones like this Rode NT1A don't offer this possibility. They only offer the cardioid polar pattern. So as you can see, there's not a polar pattern or a polar pattern combination that is specific to one type of microphone. The price of the microphone varies also depending on the model, but condenser microphones tend to be more expensive than dynamic mics. The most expensive dynamic mics, without counting ribbon mics, because these are very, very expensive, can cost around $1,000, and this is, for example, the Sennheiser MD441, which is one of the best sounding dynamic microphones, and it costs around $1,000. Then we have this Shure SM7B, which sounds amazing. It sounds good on almost anything. It can sound great on vocals, on guitars, whatever you want, and it costs around $400. And then we have very cheap ones like this Shure SM58. This is an excellent microphone that sounds great also on a lot of sound sources and costs as little as $100. Condenser microphones, on the other hand, can cost up to $10,000 on the high range, depending on the model. This one, the Neumann U87, costs around $3,000, and it is not even one of the most expensive ones. But there are also relatively cheap models like this Rode NT1A. It costs around $180 and it sounds very good on almost anything, but especially on vocals, provided that you have a good room acoustics, of course. It captures the low end and the high end better than most dynamic microphones, and it sounds very detailed. So the big question, what microphone type do you need? I can give an overall recommendation because every microphone type is good for different situations. If you want to record vocals, it highly depends on whether your room is acoustically optimized or not. If your room is acoustically treated, then a condenser microphone is your best choice because it captures the most details and the broadest frequency range. For little money, I can absolutely recommend the Rode NT1A because it sounds very good on vocals, but also sounds great on a lot of instruments as well. If you have a bit more budget, you can go for more expensive options. The AKG C414, for example, is a very good option for around $1,000. And if you want to go to more expensive options, then you have this Neumann U87. This is the gold standard for studios because it provides a very neutral, a very, very detailed sound for vocals, and it can sound good on almost every singer. If your room is not acoustically optimized, then you should definitely use a dynamic microphone as shown in the beginning. The cheapest professional option for recording vocals would be the Shure SM58. It sounds really good on vocals. The low frequencies are a bit weak, but you can adjust that with an EQ afterwards, so that's not a problem. If you have a bit more money, you can go for this Telefunken M80. This sounds very, very accurate, almost like a condenser microphone, and it captures the high frequencies especially well. For a bit more money, costing $400, you can go for the Shure SM7B. This is also a gold standard for studios. Michael Jackson, for example, is famous for recording a whole album only with this microphone. It sounds really good on vocals, but it sounds also good on guitars, electric guitars, bass amps, whatever you want. It has a very broad frequency range and it sounds almost like a condenser microphone. Thanks very much for watching. I hope I could answer some of your questions. If you have any more questions, please write them in the comments. And if you like this video, hit the like button and subscribe. And see you next time.